The smell of garlic and fresh herbs filled the air as Riley wiped down another table at Palazzo, one of the city's most expensive restaurants. Her black uniform was perfectly pressed, her hair pulled back in a neat bun and her smile ready for the next customer. But beneath that professional appearance, her mind was somewhere else entirely. Riley had been working at Palazzo for 8 months now, ever since she turned 21. The tips were good, especially on Friday nights when business executives and wealthy families filled every table. Tonight was no different. The dining room buzzed with conversations about stock prices, vacation homes, and business deals that most people could only dream about. She loved listening to the different languages spoken around her. Spanish at table 6, French at table 12, and what sounded like Italian mixed with English at the corner booth. Riley had always been fascinated by languages. While other kids her age were playing video games or scrolling through social media, she spent her free time with language learning apps and old textbooks she found at garage sales. Her apartment was filled with dictionaries, grammar guides, and notebooks covered in her handwriting. Latin phrases mixed with Greek symbols, German verb conjugations next to Chinese characters. Her roommate Zoe often joked that Riley's side of the room looked like a professor's office had exploded. "Table 9 needs their check," called Maria, the head waitress, pulling Riley back to reality. "And table 4 just sat down." Riley nodded and grabbed the check from behind the register. Table 9 had been easy tonight, a young couple celebrating their anniversary. They'd ordered the chef's special and split a bottle of wine that cost more than Riley made in a week. As she walked over with their bill, she caught pieces of conversation from nearby tables. "The merger should go through by next quarter," someone was saying at table 7. "Did you see the news about that tech company in Silicon Valley?" another voice asked. Riley loved working Friday nights not just for the money, but for the energy. There was something exciting about being around successful people, even if she was just serving their food. Sometimes she imagined what it would be like to sit at one of these tables as a customer, instead of an employee. As she handed the check to the anniversary couple, she noticed a new group being seated at table 15, the large round table near the window. 5 men in expensive suits, all looking like they'd come straight from some important meeting. Their watches probably cost more than Riley's car. The man at the head of the table was clearly the leader. He was probably in his 40s with silver hair and the kind of confidence that comes with having serious money. His voice carried across the restaurant as he talked, gesturing with his hands like he was used to commanding attention. "Peterson, you worry too much," the silver-haired man was saying as Riley approached with menus. "The Beijing office knows what they're doing." Riley set down the menus and filled their water glasses, trying to be invisible the way good waitresses learn to do. But her ears perked up when she heard one of the other men mention something about translation problems. "Mr. Chen, with all due respect, this isn't just a simple translation issue," one of the younger men said. "Our entire expansion into Eastern Europe is stuck because we can't figure out what this document actually says." The man called Chen laughed and took a sip of the wine the sommelier had just poured. "How hard can it be? We've got the best translation software money can buy." "That's just it," another man chimed in. "The software keeps giving us different answers. Our linguistics team has been working on it for 3 weeks now. They say it's some kind of historical document, maybe from the medieval period, but they can't agree on what language it's even written in." Riley finished filling the water glasses and stepped back, but she lingered nearby, pretending to adjust the flowers on a nearby table. Historical documents from the medieval period? That sounded exactly like the kind of puzzle she'd been studying for years. Chen leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying himself. "Gentlemen, you're making this too complicated. It's probably just some old contractor deed. How important could it be?" "Important enough that our legal team won't let us proceed without knowing exactly what it says," the first man replied. "The property we're trying to buy in Prague comes with this document attached. The sellers claim it gives them certain rights, but they won't explain what kind of rights. Our lawyers are afraid to move forward without a proper translation. And if we can't buy that property, we can't build the data center," another man added, "which means we can't expand our services to that region. Which means we're looking at losing about $50 million in projected revenue." Riley's hand stopped moving as she arranged the flowers. $50 million hanging on a translation? Her heart started beating faster. She'd spent countless hours studying medieval Latin, Old Church Slavonic, and early Germanic languages. Her professors at the community college where she took evening classes always said she had a natural gift for it. Chen was still talking, his voice getting louder as the wine took effect. Look, I didn't build a tech empire worth $2 billion by being scared of some old piece of paper. There's got to be someone out there who can read whatever this thing says. We've tried everything, one of his companions said, sounding frustrated. University professors, private translation services even reached out to some museums. Everyone either can't help or wants months to research it properly. We don't have months. Riley moved to the next table, her mind racing. $2 billion? This Chen person was clearly the CEO of something big, and they had a medieval document that nobody could translate. She tried to imagine what kind of text could be so difficult. Maybe it was written in multiple languages or used archaic symbols, or referenced historical events that most people wouldn't recognize. She'd seen similar challenges in her studies. Medieval documents often mixed Latin with local languages, used abbreviations that made no sense to modern readers, or referenced legal concepts that had disappeared centuries ago. But that was exactly the kind of puzzle that excited her. As she continued working, Riley kept one ear on the conversation at table 15. Chen was telling stories about his company's early days, how he'd started with nothing and built his way up to running a global technology firm. His companions hung on every word, laughing at his jokes and nodding at his business wisdom. The key to success, Chen was saying, raising his wine glass, is knowing that everything has a solution. Every problem can be solved if you're willing to pay the right price or find the right person. Riley felt a small smile cross her face. If only he knew that the right person might be standing just a few feet away, wearing a waitress uniform and making $8.50 an hour plus tips. The evening was just getting started, and Riley had a feeling this was going to be a night she'd remember for a very long time. Riley returned to table 15 with their appetizer orders, moving carefully around the increasingly animated conversation. Chen had ordered another bottle of wine, this one even more expensive than the first, and his confidence seemed to grow with each glass. "You know what your problem is, Davidson?" Chen said to the man sitting to his right. "You think like an employee instead of thinking like an owner. An owner finds solutions. An employee finds excuses." Davidson shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Sir, I understand that, but this document situation is genuinely complex. Our entire linguistics department is stumped." "Your linguistics department," Chen repeated, chuckling. "How much are we paying those people? 6 figures each? And they can't read one old piece of paper?" Riley set down the calamari and bruschetta, trying to stay invisible while her curiosity burned. She'd dealt with plenty of wealthy customers before, but something about this conversation felt different. The way Chen dismissed his experts reminded her of professors she'd had who thought expensive degrees automatically meant intelligence. "Maybe we should try a different approach," suggested the youngest man at the table. "There are some new AI translation programs that might—" "AI?" Chen interrupted, laughing so hard he nearly spilled his wine. "You want to solve this with a computer program? Listen, kid, I've been in tech for 20 years. I know exactly what AI can and can't do. If a room full of human experts can't figure this out, what makes you think a machine will do better?" Riley finished serving and stepped back, but she found herself lingering near the service station, organizing napkins that didn't need organizing. The conversation was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. Chen pulled out his phone and started scrolling through something. "You want to know what's funny? I've got a photo of this mystery document right here on my phone. Been carrying it around for weeks like some kind of treasure map. Could I see it again?" Davidson asked. "Maybe if we all looked at it together." Sure, Chen said, holding up his phone. The screen showed what looked like an old manuscript page with faded text in multiple scripts. Even from several feet away, Riley could see it was exactly the kind of document she'd been studying. Her heart rate picked up. "See this mess?" Chen continued, gesturing at the phone screen. "Half of it looks like Latin, but the Latin doesn't make sense. The other half could be German or Polish or Russian or who knows what. And these symbols here?" He pointed at something on the SCR. "And as our experts think they might be mathematical notations or maybe religious symbols. Nobody knows for sure." Riley's hands were trembling slightly as she folded napkins. From what she could see, those symbols looked like standard medieval abbreviations that scribes used to save space and parchment. The kind of thing any graduate student in medieval studies would recognize. Themio. Property sellers in Prague claim this document proves their family has had certain mineral rights to the land for over 500 years, Chen explained to his table. If that's true, our data center project is dead in the water. If it's false, we can proceed with the purchase. But we need to know what it actually says. Have you considered that maybe it really does give them those rights? The youngest member of the group asked quietly. Chen's expression hardened. In business, you don't consider failure as an option. You find a way to win. That's how I built a company worth over $2 billion while you were still in college. Riley noticed other diners starting to glance over at table 15. Chen's voice had gotten louder and his gestures more dramatic. The wine was clearly affecting his judgment, but it was also making him more talkative about details he probably shouldn't be sharing in public. You know what? Chen said suddenly, standing up from his chair. I'm tired of hearing about how impossible this is. How complicated. How mysterious. He held up his phone again, the document clearly visible on the screen. This is just words on paper. Written by people who died centuries ago. How hard can it possibly be? The restaurant had gotten quieter around them. Even the kitchen noise seemed muted. Riley found herself holding her breath. I'll tell you what, Chen announced, his voice carrying across half the dining room. I'm feeling generous tonight. Anyone in this restaurant who can tell me what this document says gets a reward. A big reward. Davidson tried to grab Chen's arm. Sir, maybe we should discuss this privately. No, I'm serious, Chen said, pulling away. I'm tired of experts who can't deliver. Maybe what we need is fresh eyes, young minds. He looked around the restaurant with a challenging smile. Anyone here speak medieval, whatever this is? A few nervous laughs came from nearby tables. Most people went back to their own conversations, treating it like dinner theater. But Riley felt frozen in place. In fact, Chen continued, clearly enjoying the attention, I'm so confident that this document is going to remain a mystery that I'll make a bet. A real bet? He paused dramatically, swaying slightly on his feet. Anyone who can translate this document accurately gets my annual salary. My entire yearly pay. The restaurant went completely silent. Sir, Davidson whispered urgently, your salary is $12 million. $12.5 million, actually, Chen corrected with a grin. Plus bonuses. But who's counting? He looked around the room again. Come on, people. $12.5 million for reading one page of text. Any takers? Riley felt like the world had shifted sideways. $12.5 million? That was more money than she could imagine. More than her family had ever seen. More than she'd make in her entire lifetime working at restaurants. A well-dressed woman at a nearby table called out, Is this some kind of publicity stunt? No stunt, Chen replied. I'm dead serious. I've got lawyers, witnesses, and enough money to back up any promise I make. He held up his phone again. One page of medieval text. $12.5 million. Who wants to be rich? Riley's mouth had gone completely dry. She could see the document on his phone screen, and while she couldn't make out all the details from her position, the general structure looked familiar. Very familiar. This is crazy, someone at another table muttered. This is opportunity, Chen shot back. This is what separates winners from losers. Winners take risks. Losers make excuses. Riley realized she was still holding the stack of napkins, gripping them so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Her mind was racing through everything she'd learned about medieval documents. All the late nights spent translating practice texts. All the professors who'd praised her natural ability with ancient languages. Could she really do this? Could she actually translate something that had stumped professional linguists for weeks? And even if she could, would she have the courage to speak up in front of a room full of wealthy strangers? Chen sat back down, still grinning. See, I told you this was impossible. Nobody even wants to try. Riley set down the napkins with trembling hands. This was her moment. This was the chance she'd been studying for without even knowing it. But first, she needed to get a closer look at that document. Riley's heart pounded as she watched Chen settle back into his chair. Still chuckling about his impossible challenge, the entire restaurant buzzed with whispered conversations about what had just happened. $12.5 million for translating one document. It sounded like something out of a movie. She looked around the dining room. A few people were taking pictures with their phones, probably posting about the crazy rich guy offering millions for a translation. Others had gone back to their meals, dismissing it as the wine-fueled boasting of someone with too much money and too much ego. But Riley couldn't stop staring at Chen's phone, which he'd placed face up on the table. Even from her position near the service station, she could make out parts of the document. The handwriting style, the way the text was laid out, the mixture of scripts, it all looked incredibly familiar. Her hands shook as she picked up a water pitcher, using it as an excuse to move closer to table 15. As she refilled glasses at nearby tables, she caught better glimpses of the phone screen. Her pulse quickened with each look. The document wasn't just familiar. She was almost certain she knew exactly what it was. During her second year of community college, Professor Williams had shown the class examples of property deeds from medieval Bohemia, the region that was now part of the Czech Republic. The format was distinctive, Latin legal language mixed with Old Church Slavonic, using specific abbreviations that were standard for that time and place. Riley had spent weeks studying those exact types of documents for her final project. She'd even written a paper on how mineral rights were recorded in medieval Prague, back when the city was the capital of the Holy Roman Empire. The symbols that had confused Chen's experts, those weren't mysterious religious markings. They were standard medieval abbreviations for measurements and legal terms. The incomprehensible mixture of languages wasn't random. It was the normal way legal documents were written in that region during the 14th and 15th centuries. But knowing what the document was and actually having the courage to speak up were two completely different things. Riley refilled the water glass of an elderly man at table 14, her mind racing. What if she was wrong? What if this wasn't the type of document she thought it was? She'd look like a fool in front of the entire restaurant. Worse, she could lose her job if Chen thought she was trying to make fun of him. But what if she was right? $12.5 million would change everything. She could pay off her student loans, help her mom with the mortgage, maybe even go to a real university instead of taking night classes at community college. She could study languages full-time, travel to the places where these ancient texts were created, maybe even become the kind of expert that companies like Chen's hired. "Excuse me, miss." The elderly man at table 14 was looking up at her with concern. "Are you feeling all right? You look a little pale." Riley realized she'd been standing frozen with the water pitcher in her hand. "Oh, sorry. I'm fine, thank you." She forced herself to keep moving, refilling glasses and clearing plates, but her attention kept drifting back to table 15. Chen was telling another story about his business success, gesturing wildly with his wine glass. His companions looked embarrassed by his behavior, but none of them seemed willing to challenge their boss. "The key to my success," Chen was saying loud enough for half the restaurant to hear, "is that I don't accept limitations. When people tell me something is impossible, I prove them wrong. That's how I built my empire." Riley paused near their table, pretending to clean an already spotless surface on the nearby service cart. This close, she could see Chen's phone screen clearly. Her heart nearly stopped. She'd been right. It was definitely a Bohemian property deed, probably from around 1420 based on the writing style. The Latin portions were standard legal language about land ownership and inheritance rights. The Slavonic sections dealt with specific local laws about mining privileges. Even the mysterious symbols made perfect sense once you knew what you were looking at. This wasn't some impossibly complex ancient mystery. It was a straightforward legal document that any graduate student in medieval European history could translate with the right reference materials. The fact that Chen's expensive experts couldn't read it said more about their specializations than about the document's difficulty. "Riley," Maria's voice snapped her back to reality. "Table 8 needs their dessert menu." Riley nodded and hurried away, but her mind stayed focused on the document. She could translate it. She was sure of it. The question was whether she had the courage to try. As she brought the dessert menu to table 8, she overheard more conversation from Chen's table. "Sir," Davidson was saying quietly, "maybe we should head back to the office. It's getting late and you have that conference call with Tokyo in the morning." "Nonsense," Chen replied. "The night is young and I'm celebrating. Do you know how good it feels to know that I've stumped every expert in the city? That document is going to stay a mystery, which means we're going to find another way to get that Prague property. I always find another way." Riley felt a flash of anger at his arrogance. Chen wasn't celebrating his brilliance. He was celebrating other people's failure. He was so convinced that the problem was impossible that he'd rather throw around millions of dollars as a joke than consider that maybe his experts just weren't the right experts. She thought about all the late nights she'd spent studying, all the professors who'd encouraged her passion for ancient languages, all the times people had dismissed her interests as impractical. Here was a chance to prove that her education had value, that her dedication meant something. But more than that, she thought about her mom working double shifts at the hospital, about her younger brother who wanted to go to college but couldn't afford it, about all the people she knew who were struggling just to get by while men like Chen threw around millions like pocket change. Riley set down the dessert menus and took a deep breath. Her decision was made. She walked slowly back toward table 15, her legs feeling unsteady. Chen was in the middle of another story, his back partially turned to her. Davidson noticed her approaching first. "Can we help you with something?" Davidson asked politely. Chen turned around, looking mildly annoyed at the interruption. "What is it?" "We didn't order anything else." Riley's mouth felt dry as cotton, but she managed to speak. "Excuse me, sir. I couldn't help but overhear your conversation about the document translation." Chen's expression shifted to amusement. "Oh, really? Don't tell me you're here to collect my $12 million too." The other men at the table chuckled, but Riley stood her ground. "Actually, sir, I'd like to take a look at that document if you don't mind." The laughter stopped abruptly. Chen stared at her for a long moment, his wine-flushed face showing a mixture of surprise and disbelief. "You're serious?" he asked. Riley nodded, not trusting her voice. Chen looked around the table at his companions, then back at Riley. A slow grin spread across his face. "Well, well," he said, picking up his phone. "This should be interesting." Chen held up his phone, the document clearly visible on the bright screen. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath as Riley stepped closer. She could feel dozens of eyes watching her, but she forced herself to focus only on the medieval text in front of her. "Take your time," Chen said with a smirk. "Though I should warn you, some very expensive experts have been staring at this thing for weeks." Riley ignored his tone and studied the screen carefully. Up close, her confidence grew even stronger. The document was exactly what she'd suspected, a property deed from medieval Bohemia, written in the standard legal format of the time. "Could you maybe turn the brightness up a little?" she asked quietly. "And zoom in on the top section?" Chen raised an eyebrow but adjusted the phone settings. "Sure, why not? Let's give you every advantage." As the image became clearer, Riley could make out individual words and phrases. The Latin portions jumped out at her immediately. Hereditas, inheritance. Privilegium, privilege or right. Mineralia, mineral resources. The structure was becoming clear. "Do you have a pen and paper I could borrow?" Riley asked, her voice steadier now. Davidson reached into his jacket and pulled out a small notebook and expensive-looking pen. "Here you go." Riley took them gratefully and started jotting down notes. The watching crowd probably thought she was stalling, but she needed to work through the translation systematically. Medieval documents often had layers of meaning, and she wanted to be absolutely certain before she spoke. "This is quite a show," Chen said to his companions, not bothering to lower his voice. "I have to admire her confidence, if nothing else." Riley tuned him out and focused on the text. The opening lines were standard legal language establishing the date and the parties involved. "Year of our Lord 1418, in the reign of King Wenceslaus." The document concerned one Pavel Novak and his descendants, regarding property in the hills outside Prague. As she worked through the Latin sections, the Old Church Slavonic portions began to make sense too. They weren't random foreign text. They were clarifications and additions that followed the legal customs of the region. The mysterious symbols that had confused Chen's experts were simply abbreviations for common legal terms. "She's actually writing something down," one of Chen's companions whispered. "Probably just copying random words to look smart," Chen replied. "I've seen this trick before." Riley's pen moved faster as she worked through the key passage. The document wasn't just a property deed. It was specifically about mining rights, just as Chen had mentioned. But the details were much more specific than he'd realized. The text granted Pavel Novak and his male descendants the right to extract silver, copper, and precious stones from 3 specific mines in the hills east of Prague. But there was a crucial limitation that changed everything. The rights were valid only so long as the mines produced sufficient yield to pay the royal tax. Riley's heart raced as she understood the implications. If the mines had stopped producing enough to pay taxes, The rights would have expired centuries ago. Chen's legal team didn't need to worry about ancient mineral rights. They just needed to check historical records to see when the mines had closed. Interesting, she murmured, making a few more notes. What's interesting? Chen asked, his amusement starting to fade. You actually think you're making progress? Riley looked up from her notes. Could you scroll down a little? I need to see the bottom portion of the document. Chen hesitated for a moment, then complied. Riley studied the final section, which contained the formal signatures and seals that validated the document. Everything confirmed her interpretation. She set down the pen and took a deep breath. Around her, the restaurant had gone completely quiet. Even the kitchen staff had stopped their usual clattering to listen. Well? Chen asked, his voice showing the first hint of nervousness. Are you going to tell us you've solved the mystery that stumped my entire linguistics department? Riley straightened up, holding her notes. Actually, yes. I can tell you exactly what this document says. Chen's confident smile faltered slightly. Oh, really? And you're sure about this? I'm sure, Riley said firmly. This is a mining rights deed from 1418, issued to Pavel Novak and his male heirs for 3 silver mines east of Prague. It grants them exclusive rights to extract silver, copper, and precious stones from these specific locations. Davidson pulled out his own phone and started taking notes. The other men at the table leaned forward, suddenly very interested. But here's the important part, Riley continued. The part your experts probably missed. The rights were conditional. They were only valid as long as the mines produced enough revenue to pay the royal mining tax to King Wenceslaus. Chen's face had gone pale. What are you saying? I'm saying that if these mines stopped being profitable enough to pay taxes, the rights would have automatically expired. You don't need to worry about current mineral rights. You just need to check historical records to see when the mines closed. Down. Riley looked at her notes one more time to make sure she hadn't missed anything. Based on the historical context, most silver mines in that region were exhausted by the late 1400s. If I had to guess, these particular rights probably expired around 1480, more than 500 years ago. The silence in the restaurant was deafening. Chen stared at Riley with an expression of complete shock. His companions were frantically taking notes and whispering to each other. You're telling me, Chen said slowly, that this document that's been holding up our $50 million project actually expired 5 centuries ago? That's exactly what I'm telling you, Riley replied. The current property owners in Prague might have inherited this document, but they didn't inherit valid mineral rights. Those expired when the mines stopped paying taxes to the king. Davidson was already on his phone, probably calling the legal team. The youngest member of Chen's group was staring at Riley like she'd just performed magic. How did you know all this? Chen asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Riley smiled for the first time since the conversation had started. I study medieval European history at community college. I wrote my final paper last semester on property laws in medieval Bohemia. This type of document is exactly what I've been learning about. Chen sat back in his chair, looking like someone had just told him the sky was green. Around the restaurant, other diners were starting to clap. Someone whistled in appreciation. A waitress, Chen muttered to himself. A community college student solved what my experts couldn't. Riley felt a surge of pride, but she tried to stay professional. Sometimes you just need someone who studied the right subject. Your experts probably specialize in modern languages or different historical periods. Chen looked at her for a long moment, then at the notes she'd written, then back at her face. Well, he said finally, I guess I owe you $12.5 million. The restaurant erupted in cheers and applause as Chen's words hung in the air. Riley felt her knees go weak as the irreality of what had just happened hit her.
$12.5 million.
The number seemed impossible, like something from a dream. But as the applause died down, she could see Chen's expression changing. The wine-fueled confidence was fading, replaced by something that looked almost like panic. His business companions were whispering urgently among themselves, and Davidson kept glancing nervously between his boss and Riley. Sir, Davidson said quietly, perhaps we should discuss the details of this arrangement privately. Chen held up a hand to silence him, never taking his eyes off Riley. No. I made a promise in front of witnesses. The question is... He paused, running a hand through his silver hair. The question is how exactly we make this work. Riley's heart sank a little. Of course, it couldn't be as simple as writing a check for $12 million. Rich people didn't get rich by giving away their annual salaries to waitresses, no matter what promises they made after too much wine. I understand, she said carefully. I know you probably didn't expect anyone to actually solve it. That's just it, Chen said, his voice becoming more focused as the alcohol seemed to wear off. I never expected this to happen, but a deal is a deal. He looked around the restaurant where people were still watching with fascination. The question is whether you trust me to honor it properly. Riley wasn't sure what he meant, but she nodded anyway. Chen pulled out his phone again, but this time he opened his contacts instead of the document. Davidson, call my lawyer. Tell him I need to set up a meeting first thing Monday morning. He looked back at Riley. What's your full name? Riley Chen, she answered, then caught herself. Wait, that's weird. We have the same last name, but we're not related or anything. Chen actually smiled at that. Trust me, if we were related, you would have inherited money instead of having to earn it by outsmarting me. He made a note in his phone. Riley Chen, and you said you're studying at community college? Yes, sir. Riverside Community College. I'm working on my associate degree in history, and then I want to transfer to a 4-year university. What's your major going to be? Medieval European Studies with a focus on linguistics and historical translation. Chen looked thoughtful. Davidson, add another item to that lawyer meeting. I want to discuss setting up an educational foundation. He turned back to Riley. Here's what I'm thinking. Giving you $12 million all at once would create a tax nightmare and probably ruin your life in ways you can't imagine. Riley felt her hopes falling, but Chen continued. Instead, I want to set up a proper arrangement. Full university tuition, anywhere you want to go. Graduate school too if you're interested. A monthly stipend so you can quit this job and focus on your studies. And when you graduate, a position with my company heading up our new historical research division. Historical research division? Riley asked. After tonight, I'm thinking my company needs experts who can solve problems that computers and expensive consultants can't handle. Old documents, historical precedents, cultural context for international business. You just saved us $50 million and possibly months of legal battles. That's worth a lot more than your tuition. Davidson was scribbling notes frantically. Sir, this is quite a departure from our usual business model. Our usual business model just got schooled by a community college student, Chen replied. Maybe it's time to try something new. Riley felt tears starting to form in her eyes. You're serious? You'd really do all that? I built my company by recognizing talent and investing in it, Chen said. Tonight you proved you have a skill set we need. The money I'd spend on this educational program is less than what we waste on consultants who can't deliver results. Around them, other restaurant patrons were still listening in fascination. Someone had started recording with their phone, probably hoping to capture the moment for social media. There is one condition, Chen added, and Riley's heart skipped. You have to maintain good grades, and you have to promise that when you graduate, you'll come work for us for at least 5 years. We're investing in your education, but we want something in return. Riley wiped away a tear with the back of her hand. 5 years? I'd work for you for 50 years after what you're offering. Chen laughed, the first genuine laugh she'd heard from him all evening. Let's start with 5 and see how it goes. He stood up from his chair, swaying only slightly. Davidson, I want all the paperwork ready by Wednesday. Tuition payments, stipend arrangements, everything legal and official. What university did you have in mind? Davidson asked Riley. Riley's mind raced. An hour ago, she'd been worried about making enough in tips to pay her rent. Now she was being asked to choose any university in the country. I've always dreamed of studying at Columbia. Their medieval studies program is supposed to be amazing. Columbia it is, Chen said. Davidson, make the calls. I want her enrolled for the spring semester. The restaurant manager approached their table cautiously. Excuse me, but is everything all right here? Some of our other guests are asking about the commotion. Chen grinned and pulled out his wallet. Everything is perfect. In fact, dinner tonight is on me. For everyone. He handed the manager several $100 bills. Whatever anyone ordered, it's covered. And make sure Riley here gets the biggest tip this restaurant has ever seen. The manager looked confused but delighted. Yes, sir. Of course, sir. As word spread through the restaurant that the mysterious businessman was paying for everyone's dinner, the atmosphere became even more festive. People were coming over to congratulate Riley, asking for her autograph, and taking pictures with her. I can't believe this is really happening, Riley said to Chen as the crowd around their table grew. Welcome to the weird world of sudden success, Chen replied. Just remember, this is only the beginning. You've got a lot of hard work ahead of you if you want to make the most of this opportunity. Riley nodded seriously. I won't let you down, Mr. Chen, I promise. I don't think you will, he said. You know what convinced me you were the real deal? It wasn't just that you translated the document. It was that you understood what the translation meant for our business problem. That's the kind of thinking we need more of. As the evening wound down, Riley found herself surrounded by business cards and contact information. Food bloggers wanted to write about the restaurant where a waitress became a millionaire. News reporters were asking for interviews. Chen's legal team was already drafting contracts. But through all the chaos, Riley kept thinking about her mother working double shifts at the hospital, and her brother who'd given up on college because they couldn't afford it. Tomorrow she would call them with news that would change all their lives. The impossible had happened. A medieval document, a drunk CEO's boast, and years of studying ancient languages had combined to create a miracle. Riley Chen, the waitress who loved languages, was about to become Riley Chen, the medieval scholar who solved million-dollar problems. And it all started with having the courage to speak up when everyone else stayed silent.